don't know me, I'm Adrian Honish of Effectus Athlete Development. And a bit of my background that a lot of you might not know is I have a strong background in sport biomechanics. I did my graduate studies research in sport biomechanics at the university, and all of my study basically surrounded vertical jumping, increasing ground reaction forces, did a lot of research and projects on increasing ground reaction force, studying that. And then my thesis specifically was a biomechanical comparison of the indoor and outdoor volleyball spike approach and takeoff. And I looked at the mechanical differences between the two, and both sides of that were about how do you increase vertical velocity at takeoff. Obviously, maximizing vertical velocity at takeoff, the faster the center of gravity is going up the moment you leave the ground, the higher you're going to jump. You do definitely see some differences between the two indoor and outdoor spike approaches and takeoffs, but ultimately, the same principles are going to apply in how to produce force, how to increase acceleration, and how to jump your highest. And there's a big gap in what young athletes know. Young athletes are told, get lower, jump higher, get in fast, fast approach, get up high. They're told certain key points like that, but the depth of the explanation isn't there. And as I do more and more strength training, I've trained for years, and plyometric training has always been a big part of athlete training. And a lot of trainers out there are doing plyometrics. There's a lot of plyometric programs you can just go buy online. Different programs have popped up over the years that have really been a bit of a fad. But understanding how to properly do plyometrics makes a world of a difference in the results you're going to get and how much you're going to improve performance and how much higher you're going to jump. Understanding the biomechanics and the biomechanical principles behind producing force will take you so much further than just training alone. If I say, do these exercises, do these sets, do these reps, take this rest and recovery, now do this, rest, do this, you'll improve, but you will never, ever reach your max potential unless you really understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to properly do it. So the physics behind all of that, that's the gap that's just athletes don't understand. So I've spent a lot of time in the last while producing a program called Flight School. I've always had a jump training program that I've done with athletes in person, but I've really reached out to more online athletes throughout the world to give them access to the information behind jumping. A proper training program, proper periodization, proper progressions, proper rest and recovery worked in there. And not just jumping and plyometrics, but the strength base and the strength work and the max strength work and the power development that has to go with that to maximize results. So that's what this program's been about. But it's also been about teaching that academic side of increasing ground reaction forces, increasing impulse, increasing vertical velocity, and jumping your highest. And how to translate that into competition, into practice, and into performance. So just to touch on a few of the things right now, just to throw it out there. Jumping is so complex. It's a product of impulse, change in momentum. So when I drop down in a jump, when I drop down, I create all of this downward negative momentum, downward accelerations. Now, how fast I can change that momentum to upward positive momentum, and the greater the momentum, mass times velocity, the higher my velocity, the greater my impulse, and the higher that impulse, the greater the acceleration I can create, and the more I accelerate upward, the higher my vertical velocity is going to be at takeoff. So the ultimate goal is how fast can my center of gravity be going up the moment I leave the ground. Higher that is, the higher I will jump. Like any free projectile in the air, that's what I can do. All of my control is while I'm on the ground. While I'm in contact with the earth, that's when I can produce force, that's when I can produce acceleration, and that's when I can increase my jump height. But how do you do that? How do you create a high impulse? Impulse is equal to force times time. Producing a force over a period of time. Now that's very interesting when it comes to jumping, because when jumping, you also want a huge change in momentum. You want to create a high impulse. You want to create acceleration. To create acceleration, you need to be doing things quickly, fast, That's the point. Now, if I do things quickly and I do things fast, then impulse equals force times time. That time is going to be lower. So I need to produce a lot of force to get a high impulse. Now, that being said, how can I increase time? How can I produce that force longer to produce a higher impulse, a greater change in momentum, more acceleration, and more vertical velocity? How can I increase that time? Well, the things I do have control over is my range of motion. So if I'm doing a jump, I want to be able to get all the way down there where the knees are 90 degrees, the hips are 90 degrees, and have all of that range to produce force. So obviously, the lower I get in the full range of motion I use, that's maximizing the time that I can produce force over and have a higher impulse. Now, still, you want to be doing that as quick as possible. As quick as possible. So how do you do that? You drop down fast. Dropping down fast is going to create a bigger downward momentum. That bigger downward momentum now has to be decelerated at the bottom to create a force driving through the ground, which creates a ground reaction force to push you up. And that creates an upward momentum now and a big change in momentum. The bigger that change in momentum, the higher your impulse. So, like I said, apply that force over the greatest amount of time possible by going all the way down to a full 90 degree at the knee, 90 degree at the hip, and driving up hard and maximizing the amount of time you can accelerate. The more time over which I can accelerate, the higher my vertical velocity is going to be to take off. But you need to do that quickly. You need to do that quickly. You can't drop down slowly and drive up, really dragging out time, because now you have a really small amount of force. And a small amount of force is going to get you nowhere. So you still need to apply the principle of doing that fast. Dropping down quick, getting up quick. A fast transition at the bottom, a quick amortization phase, where you quickly change that downward to upward. Now, doing that quickly has huge biomechanical benefits, physiological benefits in producing force. Doing that quickly places the muscles of the quads, the glutes, all on a fast stretch and contraction. The faster they can stretch and contract and that quickly change, the more elastic energy you can use, the more force the muscle can produce. If you take an elastic band, fun little experiment, take an elastic band, okay? I'll give you a few things here. And you stretch it a little bit. You hold it there, you let it go. It's not going to go very far, we know that. Now you take that same elastic, stretch it really far, hold it, let it go. It's going to go further than that first example. But you take that elastic, and if you can trust yourself to do it honestly, and now you stretch it that same long distance, you do that and let it go fast. You just do a fast stretch and boom, let it go. It's going to go the furthest out of all three of those scenarios. The faster you can stretch it, boom, and let it go, further it goes. The more that stretch and the faster that transition, the more force is produced in that elastic, and it can go. Muscles, they're not exactly the same as elastic, but it's similar in concept. The more you pre-stretch the muscle, the more elastic energy is created, and the faster you can release that and take off concentric contraction, the higher you'll jump, the more force you'll produce. So that's where impulse. You need a short amount of time. You need a short amount of time down there to get up quick, but you maximize that time by having the full range of motion still, getting that full stretch in, that full pre-stretch, and taking advantage of it. Now, proper plyometric training. I can tell you that all day, but unless you have the strength base, the strength in your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, calves, everything, if those need to be extremely strong to be able to produce high amounts of force down in that low range of motion. As you get into 90 degrees and past 90 degrees at the knee and hip, your joints become at more of a mechanical disadvantage. It's harder, it takes more force to produce torque and movement at those joints when you're in those positions. So you need to be extremely strong to be able to still be quick in that position. So when you're starting out as an athlete, you're probably going to jump higher getting this low. If I drop there and I drive up, I'm going to be able to jump higher doing that than I am getting all the way down and up, because I'm going to get so slow at the bottom because my legs aren't developed enough, the muscles aren't developed and strong enough to sustain that downward acceleration and quickly absorb that and change that to upward acceleration, upward momentum, have that high impulse. So what you lose, if you're not strong enough, is you can't create an impulse efficiently enough to maximize vertical velocity at takeoff. So that's where I saw the gap, and I thought, let's design a program that not only takes you through the proper strength phases and plyometric progressions, but it also teaches you these principles. Teaches you about the stress shortening cycle. Teaches you the difference between a reaction jump versus a full range of motion depth jump or drop squat or things like that. It takes time to teach you how to absorb forces. Create an eccentric contraction. When you drop down in a squat and all those muscles stretch, as I drop down here, my quads stretch, my hamstring stretch, my glutes stretch, they're all in a pre-stretch. But you have to absorb that force by producing an eccentric contraction in the muscle, which is tension or creating force while under tension, while stretching. So as those muscles lengthen, they contract, and it takes a huge amount of force and a load on the body doing that. So the program has to first focus on proper strength base, developing that strength, general strength, taking that up to max strength and producing more and more force by increasing the loads on the muscle. Not only does that strengthen the muscle, but you get the neurological adaptation. Your body starts to learn how to fire those muscles. What neurons does it fire? And in what pattern does it activate muscles in the lower body to produce that force? So you get that neurological adaptation, especially as weights start to get heavier and heavier. You really start to adapt that way, and your body starts to more efficiently fire muscle and use muscle. Now, you also develop the strength, a little bit of hypertrophy, build some muscle. Now, after you do that, you need to focus on those eccentric loads. How do you land? How do you drop down in a squat? How do you absorb those forces? Training that first is going to prevent injury, and it's going to allow your body to, again, neurologically adapt and to prepare for what's next in plyometrics, the next phases. You can't just jump to advanced plyometrics and get the most out of it. You have to get better at all these other little principles as you go. So eccentric loads. Then you work on reaction jumps. Reaction jumps are really, really focusing on decreasing the amount of ground contact time, producing force quickly, fast contractions. So things like ankle hops, little hops with the ankles, or drop jumps. A drop jump, stepping off a box, landing, not a lot of movement at the knees and hips, just landing, getting up quick, and getting up fast, pounding off the ground, creating fast ground reaction forces with a high impulse, but a very small amount of time. So it's maximum force with very little ground contact time. So that's teaching you how to anticipate the landing and create a fast contraction, reaction jumps. Then after you've now done the strength, the eccentric, you've done the reaction jumps, now you get into some more full range of motion exercises like a drop squat, where you work on getting all the way down and then jumping up quick from that lower position. Maybe some double leg hops for distance, but really focusing on getting low, driving out. You get into split squat jumps, lunges, so getting all the way down here. So now I'm at a full range of motion and driving up from that position. Okay? So now you're getting into more intense plyos. But you can't do that before doing all the beginning groundwork first. And there's no point in doing that until you understand how to produce the movements. To understand that I'm not just getting low and jumping. I need to have a fast transition down there. I'm still trying to spend as little time on the ground as possible while using a maximum amount of range of motion to create the most vertical velocity by accelerating through that whole range. Okay, so these are all principles that if you can understand that in your training, and you can apply that in every single rep, every single set of every exercise while you train, your potential for performance increases is so much higher. How much you can get out of that is so much better. I'm a big believer in training that if you're going to put in the time and you're going to put in the sweat equity and the work to do workouts consistently almost every day, do them right. Do them right and get the most out of it. Understand why you're doing it, understand how to do it properly, and then apply all of that in every rep of every set, every workout. It adds up exponentially in your training as an athlete and where you end up down the road. But where you end up down the road starts with every workout right now. Starts with today's workout, tomorrow's workout, the next one, next week, next month, next year, the year after, and how you progress through that. So it's just there's a gap there that needs to be addressed, and that's understanding the biomechanical principles behind vertical jumping and how to produce vertical velocity and how to jump higher and how to apply that in training and then take that into practice and competition. I'm going to use volleyball as an example. Every single time you work on hitting and attacking as an athlete in volleyball practice, apply those principles. I can tell you right now from my thesis research, the #1 variable in increasing jump height in a volleyball spike approach and takeoff is horizontal velocity. Okay? Ultimately, like I said, obviously, the more vertical velocity you can create at takeoff, the faster your center of gravity is going up, the higher you're going to jump. But how do you get that vertical velocity? How do you get that center of gravity to go up the fastest? It honestly starts with horizontal velocity during the approach. Athletes with the fastest approach, the fastest horizontal velocity going into that plant are the athletes that jump the highest and achieve the highest heights. There's a lot of reasons behind that I've kind of touched on already. When you approach and you increase horizontal velocity and you come in hard and you get those feet out in front of you to plant, way out in front, you create a braking force. So I'm applying force down on the ground at the angle I hit the ground, the angle of attack. So boom, I'm producing a force that way. And as I plant, the ground produces the same force back on me this way. The harder I attack the ground there, the harder I come in at it, the harder the ground reaction force drives back at me. Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the higher that braking force is, and the quicker it is too, you'll find what's called the step close. That last plant is called the step close. A fast step close is ideal for producing a higher impulse and vertical jump height. So you don't want a long, dragged out plant. You want a quick, boom, feet come together, you go up. So coming in hard, having a high horizontal velocity, I should say, increases braking forces, loads the legs, creates way more pre-stretch and more force on the legs to decelerate and now accelerate. The same concept would be if I drop down slowly and I jump, I'm only going to get so high. If I get strong in the legs and I drop down fast, then I drive up quick, have a fast transition, I'm going to get higher. I'm going to get higher. Same concept here. If I come in fast and I plant aggressively and I apply that force down on the ground, I get the braking force, all that translates into preload of the muscle, pre-stretch, stress shortening cycle, and I get up fast, I'm going to jump higher than someone who comes in slow. But like everything again, the amount of strength required in the legs to come in hard and absorb that force efficiently, to absorb that and translate that into vertical velocity is immense. It's immense. You need to do all that strengthening to be able to perform at your best. To be able to create these movements and these forces and to do it safely. To prevent injury, you have to strength train. As an athlete, the loads placed on your body and the things you do is unbelievable. It's unbelievable the amount of force that gets applied to muscles and joints and the body as an athlete. You get beat up day in and day out. The only defense to that is to be strong and to stay healthy, rest and recover, but build strength. Build strength and do it properly. Do it progressively, gradually, and following proper periodization that allows you rest and recovery time. You have to do that. You can't just do plyometrics. I can't stress that enough. If an athlete just jumps into a plyometric program, they'll improve for a while. If they just start jumping, the more you jump, the higher you'll learn to jump, and you'll gradually improve, but you'll hit a plateau. And then that's as good as you're going to get from just doing plyometrics. You might fluctuate up and down a bit, but that's what you get. Now you increase that strength base, you build that foundation, and you mix that in with plyometrics properly. You do both, allowing for also proper rest and recovery, and you're going to improve quicker. When you plateau, you go back to building more strength, rest and recovery, hit the plows again, you improve more, and you continue to taper back and forth and periodize things so that you can continue to improve. And you never hit a ceiling limit. You just keep raising that ceiling. When you get close to your potential, you get stronger and that ceiling limit goes up, your potential goes up, and you just keep improving. And that's a long process. I'm talking a career as an athlete. So you start out doing things properly and understanding these things when you're young, and then you apply them and you continue to progress. That's what I'm telling you about. Okay, so applying those principles, going back to the volleyball spike approach and takeoff, I could talk about this forever. All I told you so far is that horizontal velocity is the #1 variable in determining those who are going to jump higher. But what about also the full range of motion? So as you approach and you plant, making sure you get into that deeper knee bend, get low in the hips, and be in that position driving up. You want to be here. You want to be low, boom, and driving. Again, you need more strength to do that. That also gives you more time over which you can accelerate, and you jump higher. The role of the arms. Getting the arms back and driving the arms through to increase the vertical velocity of the center of gravity. It also loads the legs more at the bottom, creates a bigger pre-stretch, increases that stretch shortening cycle and things. I'll talk about the arms another day, but the arms are important. Just trust me on that. They play some pretty interesting roles in the dynamics of the vertical jump. But that's for another talk. Now, how do you lower that center of gravity in a spike approach and takeoff so that you can maximize jump height? You can't be tall. I can't come into the approach like this and then drop down and drive up. Ideally, you gradually lower your center of gravity into that position so that now you can just have a quick pre-stretch and get up. That decreases the amount of momentum you suddenly have to absorb at the end. It's kind of tricky to do, but if you ever test it out yourself, try doing a full spike approach, but think about gradually getting lower into the plant, gradually getting lower, and then boom, and get up. You'll jump higher. You will, guaranteed. I did my first ever jump training program when I was about 19, 20 years old. I wish somebody had done this for me earlier when I was in high school, and I could have done this training then and really benefited at that time. But after high school, I went to university, created my first ever jump training program myself with a ton of research, put it all in there, did the program myself for 12 weeks, and it was mind-blowing how much higher I could jump. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And trying these principles, like doing the goofiest things at home, like doing a normal spike approach, jumping up as high as I can, and then doing what I just said and gradually lowering my center of gravity, gradually lowering, gradually then boom, driving up, banging my head on the ceiling. Doing that at home and going, oh, did I just hit the ceiling? Never done that before. Jumped higher. Did that in a matter of 2 minutes. I didn't train to jump higher. All I did was take a biomechanical principle, apply it, and it worked. That's the thing with physics. It works. It's proven. It's science. So let's fill that gap and better understand the dynamics, the mechanics, the kinematics, kinetics, the biomechanics of jumping. And that's the purpose behind the flight school jump training program, to close that gap, to teach athletes more than just training, to give you more than just a training program. It's not just a training program. It's not here's your sets, reps, exercises, do this. It's the academic piece of teaching the principles, the biomechanics, how to jump properly, how to produce force, how to increase ground reaction force, how to increase acceleration using range of motion, speed of contraction, things like that, how to maximize vertical velocity at takeoff and jump your highest. That's what the program's about, and that's why I developed it. I developed it to close that gap and provide education to athletes so that they can train properly through their career and on as long as they compete as an athlete. That's it. Phase one is a huge accomplishment in that it's on demand. All of phase one is on demand. You're casting the video of the workout up on your TV and you're doing it with me. I'm doing it with you. We're together. I'm taking you through every single exercise, every single set, every workout. I'm teaching you those principles. I'm drilling them into you. I'm explaining why we're doing it, how we're doing it, how to get the most out of it, and how to apply that into your training, your performance, your competition, everything, your sport. I'm teaching the movements. I'm applying the physics. And I'm doing that in every workout. If it's a 45-minute session, I'm with you that whole time for 45 minutes, pushing you, training you, and teaching you all at the same time. I'm your jump coach. There's 21 sessions in phase one, 21 sessions of that. Imagine how much you come out of that with, how much knowledge. that you can apply. And it prepares you for phase 2. It prepares you for phase 3. Advanced plyometrics and advanced flight school jump training that comes after that. Jump training, athlete training, sport performance, it's a longevity process. You don't just do a jump training program for 8 weeks, finish it, and say, I'm an amazing athlete. Look how high I can jump. That's it. You're not going to be able to jump that high forever if you don't maintain, if you don't continue to train. So what's next after that? And then the next phase and the next phase. And you taper and you progress. You take rest and recovery. You keep training that strength element to build that base and that foundation, that max strength upon which you can develop more explosive power, more speed, and get more out of your plyometrics. All these things. All these things. It's a very complete program to help athletes become the best they can, to get to that potential, that ceiling limit, and then raise that limit and get there, keep raising it. Find out what your 100% is. Find out what intensities you need to train at. And then when you get to that 100%, how do you push yourself to give even more? That's how you improve. And that's what I've developed, and that's what I hope you can take part in. Feel free to shoot me any questions you ever have. I'd love to talk about this stuff. If you have questions, let me know. Let's talk. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. You can tell I'm passionate about it. I'm excited about it. And I hope I put a little bit of that into you. So keep training hard, keep working hard, never settle, and get the most out of all the training and time you put in. I said so before. I'll say it again and again and again. If you're going to put in the time and effort, get the most out of it. Get the most out of it. Thanks.